the general public don't quite understand the history of the Tatas. He was actually a Tata through the adoption of his father. Ratan Tata was considered an heir to this dynasty only in the last years of JRD's life. He himself admitted to me in the interview. Well, my impression was of an old school aristocratic businessman, not like today's businessman that you usually meet. He was on time, he was very polite, saw me to the door, courteous. Also, I met him for an interview in connection with a book I was writing on the Parsis and the Tatas, and specifically the fight between Mistry and Tata, which was very hot at that time. A lot of people had warned me that he doesn't open up and you'll have a lot of problems. So I went thinking that he would be very guarded and I would not be able to persuade him to keep my tape recorder on. But he was surprisingly kind and obliging. Even though he knew that I had met Mr. Mistry earlier and that this fight between them was going on. And I asked him also, is it okay if I quote you anywhere except where it's off the if you say it's off the record? And he said, yeah, sure. Which was very open compared to the image that had been given to me by some people.
Ma'am, was he known to be a loner?
Yes, he definitely was a loner, and that's something that not even people close to him only mentioned. When I mentioned it to him, he laughed and he said, he said, I'm not antisocial, but I'm not very sociable. I think before we talk about the arc of him taking over Tata's sons, it will be better if we give a little background about him, because a lot of the general public don't quite understand the history of the Tatas. Now, he was actually a Tata through the adoption of his father, who was adopted, and he was brought up by the daughter-in-law of the founder of the dynasty, Jamsetji Tata. And he went to abroad, he studied at Cornell, and his father was a disciplinarian, and if he was, one of the reasons why he was possibly a loner was that he came from a broken home, and both his parents remarried. And I think he felt slightly neglected. It was his grandmother who was given charge of him. And she made him very, very conscious of the traditions and the responsibilities of being in the Tata family, and that he should live up to expectations. And I think he was always a little tense about the fact that he should not let the family and the company down. That was both his strength and his weakness.
Ma'am, talking about the family, can you show us the family chart?
Yeah.
Explain to us?
The family chart is there in my book. The Tatas fed Freddie Mercury and other Bawas. Bawas, as you know, means Parsis. And he was very much a Parsi. See, here is the family tree. And people have a lot of misconceptions about the family tree. I don't know if you can see it over there. See, Jamsetji Tata, the founder, the man who had such a pioneering industrialist, he envisaged starting a steel industry when all the Brits said it's impossible. He envisaged, thermal power for India. He wanted an Indian Institute of Science, which was, all of his dreams were eventually set up by his son, but he started so many things. See, so he came from this long line of priests which goes back to 1271. And he is...
If you can hold it.
Yeah. Can it be seen?
Yes.
And his father was the first man who left the family, what do you call it, not occupation, well, the family calling, which was being a priest. And he took up business. Naswar Tata, who also did trade with China, who did trade, not also, he did trade with China also to make some of his money. But it's a total misconception, because some nasty people give the story that the Tata money originally came from opium trade. Not at all. Whatever little money they made in China, they actually lost it later when in the cotton market crash. They went on to make other fortunes, and especially in the cotton, they started cotton mills in Bombay. Jamsetji also started. Now from Jamsetji, if you look, he had only two sons, Ratanji and Dorabji. And these sons had no heirs. So Ratanji, the younger son, when he died, his widow Nawajbai adopted a boy from an orphanage, a Parsi, but from an orphanage, and they say he had the same name, Tata, and was a distant cousin. Well, that's according to the Tata version. Whatever it is, this boy Naval was born, and he was the father of Ratan. At the same time, one of a cousin, R.D. Tata, he was part of the Tata Group, and he married a French lady, and from he had several children. The eldest is very well known, J.R.D. Tata, Jahangir Ratan Tata. And Jahangir Ratan Tata became head of this Tata Group early, because after Dorabji Tata died, then his cousin Saklatwala died. JRD became for a long stint, and he was a legend. Now when young Ratan Tata came back to India, he didn't want to come back. He told me that himself. He said, I wanted to stay in America. I had a free life, a good life. But his grandmother said, no, you have to come back. But the people at Tata's were not very welcoming of him. This is something that people now don't realize. He had to face a lot of difficulties. They made it as difficult as possible for him. When I asked him, who are these people who made it so difficult for you? He said, well, JRD was not very helpful, and neither was the other one of the great bosses in Tata's, Mulgaonkar. But I said, why were they like this? He said, they didn't give me a proper position. They did not, a designation. They sent me off. And he said they just seemed unhelpful. Possibly there was some degree of rivalry and animosity between his father and J.R.D. Tata. So in fact, Ratan Tata was considered an heir to this dynasty only in the last years of JRD's life. He himself admitted to me in the interview that he became close to JRD only 6 years before JRD left the company. And at that stage, JRD appointed him as his successor. I think one thing that worked in his favor was the Tata name. JRD realized that to hold all these companies together, we need somebody from the family only.
And ma'am, what were his other interests?
His other very big interest was flying. When he was in college, he explained that his father was very strict, and in those days you didn't get much foreign exchange for a student. So he worked in a restaurant and kitchen, cleaning up and cleaning and generally doing dog body work, so that he could earn money to take flying lessons, because his student stipends did not come, and he remained active in flying. I think even at 60 he was flying planes, and the interest in all the Tata families in planes is very obvious. JRD, his predecessor, started Air India, and that was one. And he for years wanted to start an airline again after the government took over Air India, and because of political pressures by different governments and other businessmen stifled the attempts of Tatas to get into the flying business again, though they are the founders of aviation in India. But finally, when Air India, very, very different from when it started, and it was an airline where it really looked after the customers, but under bureaucratic, domination, it had been totally ruined. Tata's was the only person who bid for this white elephant, and they had the courage to take it on. I hope they do make a success of him, but it was a very courageous move, and it's typical of the man that Ratan Tata was, that he would take on a challenge like this, because most people would have said it is a very foolish decision, because as you know, you will have to put in crores and crores, billions, into make Air India profitable.
And then what next for the Tatas now?
That's a tricky question. You see, Tata's is one group which is not owned by individuals, contrary to what a lot of people think. Ratan Tata himself is not a very rich man, because the Tatas believed in philanthropy, and so the sons, both the sons of the founder, Ratanji and Dorabji, they left all their money to philanthropic trusts. These philanthropic trusts owned the holding company for the Tata companies, the holding group, Tata and Sons. They were the shareholder. These 66% of Tata and Sons, which is the holding company for all the Tata individual companies, is owned by these two trusts. So the question is, what happens now? Because who controls those charitable trusts will control the group. True, the day-to-day running of the company is left to the chairman of Tata, Mr. Chandrasekharan. But in a normal company, it would be the chairman of the board who decides on the key decisions, who becomes the next chairman of our group, etc. Here there's no such chairman. Ratan Tata was the chairperson of both the Dorabji Trust and the Ratan Tata Trust. So now who gets it? That has to be seen. The few trustees who are left will have to vote and decide. Now the only close family left is Ratan's half-brother, Naval Tata. He was a good businessman, but most people in the Parsi community felt there was an estrangement between the two brothers, which is why for a long time he did not make Noel, his very much younger half-brother, a trustee on any of the family trusts. So only in 2019, I think he made him on one trust and then on the other trust. So there's a speculation that Noel will become the key trustee in these two charitable trusts. But you can't say anything, because if you look at the composition of the two trusts, you will find that the two deputy chairmen are unrelated to the Tata family. One is Mr. Venu Srinivasan, who owns the TVS group in the south, and the other is Mr. Singh, who was the former defense secretary, unrelated to the Tata family. So, and there are a few other trustees, so they will decide.
So ma'am, what kind of a businessman was he? What set him apart?
I think what really set him apart was, he followed in the tradition of the Tatas, which is that they insisted on ethicality in business. They did not believe in payments under the table, bribes, etc. Of course, this pure image was slightly dented by the Neera Radia tapes and the Indian Express Tata tapes about some dealings with Alpha. But I think wherever possible, he tried to take the straight and honorable path. But sometimes with business in India, you have to cut a few corners. But certainly I would say that he cut less corners than our present lot of businessmen. And he was an old school, I mean, abroad the name of Tatas is so respected that I know a German company once said that the word of a Tata is good enough for me. I don't need any document.